The sky above the ruined moon burned red with fire. Broken ships floated like silent corpses, their twisted metal casting shadows across the barren land. Explosions shook the ground every few minutes, the echoes carrying far into the empty horizon. Captain Elias Ward, a human soldier in battered combat armor, staggered across the rocky plain. His rifle was low on charge, and his left arm throbbed from shrapnel that had torn through the plating. Yet he kept moving. Around him, a small group of human civilians hurried, fear in their eyes as they clutched what little they had managed to carry. Elias's orders were simple: hold the line, protect the retreat, and buy time for the last transports to escape the moon. He had been fighting for hours, and the truth was heavy on his shoulders. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and out of time. But orders were orders, and more than that, these people were his responsibility. Keep moving, he shouted over the distant roar of artillery. His voice was rough but steady. The shuttle is not far. Don't stop now. The civilians nodded, some trembling, some crying quietly, but they obeyed. That was enough for Elias. He limped behind them, scanning the horizon for enemy movement. The Krillari, tall, elegant aliens with crystalline armor and energy spears, were hunting every survivor. As Elias reached a ridge, he froze. Below, half buried in smoke and debris, was a strange wreck, sleek curved metal glowing faintly with alien symbols. It was not human. It was Krillari, and it was not empty. Through the smoke, Elias spotted a figure struggling to crawl out of the broken hull. She was tall, her silver-blue skin shining faintly under the dim light, her long hair flowing like strands of white fire. Her ornate armor was cracked, and blood, blue and shimmering like liquid crystal, ran down her side. Elias instantly raised his rifle. The civilians gasped behind him, but something stopped him from pulling the trigger. The figure collapsed on the rocks, too weak to rise, and then, even in her pain, she lifted her head. Her eyes locked with his, brilliant violet, filled not with hatred but with desperation. Elias hesitated. He had seen plenty of Krillari before, but never like this. This one wasn't a soldier in shining armor. She was broken, vulnerable, and alone. One of the civilians whispered fearfully, That's no ordinary Krillari. Look at her crown. She's royalty." Elias's heart sank. He realized the truth. The intricate headpiece, the crest across her armor, it could only mean one thing. This was Princess Serenia Kriller, heir to the empire they had been fighting against for years. Everything he had been taught screamed inside his mind. She was the enemy, the symbol of the war that had killed millions. But another part of him, smaller, quieter, but stronger, saw only a wounded being, helpless on a battlefield full of death. A sound broke his thoughts. Krillari soldiers, a hunting squad, were closing in fast from the far side of the ridge. Their metallic voices carried over the wind, barking commands in their own language. They were tracking survivors. They would be here in less than a minute. Elias turned to the civilians. "Go now, down the canyon. Don't stop." "But Captain," one started. "Go." Elias barked, sharper this time. "I'll cover you." The group obeyed, running down the rocks toward safety. Elias then looked back at the princess. She was barely conscious, her breath shallow, her violet eyes fluttering. He cursed under his breath. He could leave her. He should leave her. No one would blame him. She was the enemy. Saving her would bring nothing but trouble. But Elias was a soldier who had made a promise long ago, to protect those who could not protect themselves. And right now she was just as helpless as the civilians. The Krillari voices grew louder. He had no more time to think. "Damn it," he muttered, and rushed toward her. Serenia's eyes widened faintly as the human soldier knelt beside her. She tried to speak, but only a weak whisper came. Elias slid his rifle to his back and hooked his arms under her shoulders. The moment he lifted her, pain shot through his own wounds, but he gritted his teeth and pushed forward. "Hold on," he said, his voice low, steady. "I've got you." Serenia blinked at him, confusion and disbelief in her gaze. "Human, why?" she whispered. "No time," Elias said simply, dragging her across the rocks toward cover. The first Krillari hunters appeared on the ridge above. Their crystalline armor glowed in the firelight, and their eyes burned with cold fury as they spotted the scene below. To them, the sight was impossible. A human soldier carrying their princess away from battle. "Fire," one of them roared. Energy bolts streaked through the air. Elias twisted his body, shielding Serenia with his armor. The blast tore across his side, sending burning pain through his chest, but he didn't let go. He forced himself to move faster, stumbling into the shadows of the canyon, his vision blurred. His strength was fading, but every time he thought about collapsing, he felt the weight of the princess in his arms and he kept going. At last he reached a shallow cave carved into the rock. He pushed Serenia inside and collapsed beside her, his breath ragged. The Krillari hunters shouted outside, their footsteps echoing. But the smoke and darkness of the canyon hid them for the moment. Inside the cave, silence fell except for Elias's heavy breathing and Serenia's faint gasps. He looked at her again. Her wound was deep, glowing blue blood staining the ground. Without help, she wouldn't last long. Elias removed his gloves and tore a strip from his undershirt. "Hold still," he said quietly. Serenia weakly tried to push him away. "Enemy, you are enemy." Elias ignored her words. He pressed the fabric against her side, stopping the bleeding. She flinched at the contact, her sharp breath catching, but then her body eased slightly as the pressure steadied the wound. "Enemy or not," Elias said, his voice steady despite the pain in his own chest. "You're not dying here, not while I'm still breathing." Serenia stared at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. For the first time in her life, she saw a human not as a rival or a savage, but as something different. A man who chose to protect her even when it cost him blood. The sounds of the hunters faded into the distance. For now they were safe, but both knew this was only the beginning. Elias leaned back against the stone wall, exhaustion pulling at him. The princess lay beside him, watching him silently, confusion and something else flickering in her gaze. He had saved her. And in doing so, without knowing it, he had tied himself to a destiny neither of them could escape. The cave was dark, lit only by the faint blue glow of alien blood on the rocks. Captain Elias Ward leaned against the wall, his armor dented, his chest still burning from the earlier blasts. Every breath hurt, but he stayed awake. His hand never left the rifle resting on his lap, ready for the next danger. Beside him, Princess Serenia lay motionless, her silver blue skin pale, her long white hair tangled with dust and blood. She had lost much strength, but her violet eyes were still sharp as they studied the human soldier who had carried her through fire and death. For a long time, neither spoke. The silence stretched, broken only by their uneven breathing. Finally, Serenia's voice came, soft but steady. "You saved me?" Elias did not look at her. "Yeah, didn't have much choice, did I? You were bleeding out." Her gaze narrowed. "You could have left me. You should have left me. I am your enemy." Elias adjusted the cloth he had tied around her wound. "Maybe, but I'm also a soldier. I don't leave the helpless to die. Doesn't matter what side they're on." Her lips parted slightly in surprise. Among the Krillari, mercy to an enemy was weakness. Yet this human spoke of it like it was natural, like it was something to be proud of. Serenia's eyes drifted to his side. Blood leaked through the cracks in his armor. "You are hurt as well." Elias gave a faint laugh, dry and tired. "Part of the job." The princess fell silent again, but her mind was racing. A human had shed blood for her. Royal blood. Among her people, that was no small matter. She struggled to sit up, ignoring the pain, and her hand touched the symbol engraved on her broken armor. "You do not understand what you have done," she whispered. Elias raised an eyebrow. "I think I do. I saved someone who needed saving. That's it." Her eyes locked with his, burning with intensity. "No, it is not that simple. You spilled blood for me. You shielded me with your life. By Krillari law, the oldest of our empire that binds us. I cannot ignore it." Elias frowned. "Binds us? What are you talking about?" She straightened her back despite the pain, her voice now stronger, filled with the weight of ancient tradition. "The bond of blood debt. It is a law written before even my throne. If one bleeds for the royal line, if one gives their strength to shield us, then we are bound to them. I am sworn to you. Until your life ends, mine is tied to yours." For a moment, Elias just stared at her, thinking she must be delirious from blood loss. But the look in her eyes told him otherwise. "She meant it. That's crazy," he said finally. "You're saying you're stuck with me just because I didn't want you dead?" "It is not a choice," Serenia replied, her voice cold but trembling slightly. "It is law, ancient, sacred. My people cannot break it. If I deny it, I dishonor the throne and lose the right to rule." Elias leaned his head back against the stone, groaning. "Just my luck. I save one person, and suddenly I'm tangled in alien politics." But when he looked at her again, he saw something in her expression he hadn't expected. Not pride, not arrogance, but a strange calm, almost relief. "You do not believe in our law," she said softly. "But I do. And that means I will never forget what you did. I will stand by you no matter what comes. Elias shook his head. I don't need anyone standing by me. I just need to get my civilians off this rock. Serenya's gaze lingered on him. You say that. Yet you bleed alone for people who are not even your family. That is why the law speaks of bonds. You may not want it, but it already exists. Before Elias could argue further, voices echoed outside the canyon. Krillary hunters again. Their footsteps clattered on stone, and their sharp alien language carried through the night air. Serenya tensed, fear flashing in her violet eyes. If they found her here, they would kill the human instantly and drag her away. She could not allow that, not after the bond had been formed. She turned to Elias quickly. Listen to me. If they come, you must not resist. I will claim the law before them. They cannot harm you if I declare the bond of blood debt. Elias frowned. You're telling me a squad of angry aliens will just listen to some ritual words? They must, she said firmly. It is beyond loyalty. It is the foundation of our empire. Even my enemies in the court cannot break it. The voices drew nearer. Elias gripped his rifle, ready for a fight. But Serenya struggled to rise, leaning on him for support. Her body shook with weakness, yet her eyes blazed with royal command. The Krillari hunters appeared at the cave mouth, their crystal weapons glowing as they leveled them at Elias. Their leader's voice rang out, filled with contempt. Human filth. Step away from the princess. Elias raised his weapon halfway, but Serenya lifted her hand, her voice cutting through the cave like steel. Hold your fire. By the sacred law of the Empire, I declare the bond of blood debt. This human has bled for me, shed his life to protect mine. From this moment forward, he is under my shield. Any hand raised against him is a hand raised against the throne. The hunters froze. Shock flickered in their glowing eyes. The leader lowered his weapon slightly, disbelief written on his face. Princess, you cannot mean— I have spoken. Serenya's voice thundered with surprising strength. The law binds me. He is mine to protect as I am bound to him. Stand down. The soldiers hesitated, but none dared defy the ancient law. With visible frustration, the leader lowered his weapon. As you command, Princess. Elias stared, still processing what had just happened. The same Krillari soldiers who had been ready to kill him now stepped back, eyes averted as if he were untouchable. Serenya leaned heavily against him, her strength nearly gone. She whispered, just loud enough for him to hear. You see, the bond is real. Elias exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple. This day just keeps getting better. The hunters formed a protective circle around them as they moved deeper into the canyon, carrying the wounded princess and her unlikely human guardian. Every Krillari soldier cast suspicious glances at Elias, but none dared touch him. He walked beside Serenya, his rifle still in his hands, feeling like a man caught in the middle of a storm he had never meant to enter. When they reached the royal transport hidden in the cliffs, Serenya nearly collapsed. The medics rushed to her side, placing glowing bands over her wounds. Yet even as they worked, she kept her eyes on Elias, as if afraid he would vanish if she looked away. Before losing consciousness, her last words were quiet but firm. You are bound now, human. Bound to me, and I will not let them harm you. Hours later, Elias sat alone in the transport side chamber, his armor stripped, his wounds treated by alien medicine that stung like fire. He stared at the glowing walls around him, feeling out of place in the heart of an enemy vessel. The door slid open, and one of the Krillari officers entered. His expression was sour, his eyes filled with disdain. You should not be here, the officer said coldly. You are an enemy soldier, but the law protects you now. Princess Serenya has spoken. Do not think this means you are welcome. Elias met his glare calmly. Trust me, I don't feel welcome. The officer sneered but left without another word. Elias leaned back, running a hand through his messy hair. He had survived the battlefield. He had saved an alien princess. And now, because of some ancient law, she had tied herself to him forever. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. His life would never be the same again. The Krillari transport ship cut across the dark sky, its silver hull glowing faintly against the stars. Inside, everything hummed with strange energy, the walls smooth and curved, glowing with symbols Elias could not read. The air smelled faintly sweet, like crystal dust mixed with fire. Captain Elias Ward sat quietly in a corner chamber, his back against the wall. His human armor had been taken, replaced by simple medical robes after his wounds were sealed with alien gels. The treatment had saved him, though the burns on his side still ached. He felt restless. The ship was enemy territory, filled with tall, graceful soldiers who looked at him with hatred every time they passed. They whispered among themselves, their sharp violet eyes glaring at him like knives. Elias had survived battles, but this, being surrounded by enemies who could not touch him because of an ancient law, felt stranger than any war zone. The door slid open, and a voice sharp with command filled the room. "On your feet, human." Elias looked up. A Krillari officer stood there, armored in glittering crystal plates, his face carved with disdain. Behind him were two guards holding long spears that glowed with energy. Elias pushed himself up slowly. "Where are we going?" "To the royal court," the officer replied coldly. "The princess has demanded your presence. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not touch anything." "You are alive only because of her words," Elias shrugged. "Sounds like I'll fit right in." The officer's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing else. The guards led Elias through the winding halls of the ship. Everywhere he looked, the Krillari watched him. Scientists pausing their work, soldiers whispering, attendants frowning as he passed. He could almost hear their thoughts. Why is a human here? Why does the princess protect him? At last, the doors ahead opened, and Elias stepped into the royal chamber. It was vast, shaped like a circle, the walls carved from glowing crystal that seemed alive with light. A throne of silver and violet stone rose at the far end, and upon it sat Princess Serenia. She looked stronger than when Elias had last seen her. Her wounds had been healed by royal medics, and she now wore a flowing robe of white and silver, her crest crown shining faintly, but her eyes, those violet eyes, were fixed firmly on Elias the moment he entered. "Captain Elias Ward," she said, her voice clear, carrying authority that silenced the chamber. "Step forward." Elias walked slowly to the center of the hall. He could feel dozens of eyes on him, the nobles, generals, and advisors of the Krillari Empire. Their expressions ranged from disgust to curiosity, but none looked friendly. "This human," Serenia continued, her voice ringing across the hall, "bled for me on the battlefield. He shielded me with his own body and saved my life when no other could. By the ancient law of the Empire, I declared the bond of blood debt. From this day forth, his life is bound to mine. None may harm him." The chamber erupted with murmurs and outrage. One noble, his robe glittering with jewels, stepped forward in anger. "Princess, this cannot stand. He is human. Their soldiers burn our cities, their fleets challenge our skies, and you bring one of them here as your protector." Another voice, harsher, joined in. "He is no savior, he is a spy. Can you not see the danger? You would dishonor the throne for a single soldier?" Elias stood quietly, arms crossed. He had expected this. He knew the look of a room filled with people who wanted him gone. But Serenia's eyes never wavered. She stood from her throne, tall and regal, her voice cutting through the chaos. "The law is clear," she declared. "The bond is older than any of you. It is older than the Empire itself. To deny it is to break the foundation of our honor. Would you spit on the law just to rid yourselves of a single human?" The nobles fell silent. No one dared speak against the sacred tradition. Still, their glares toward Elias were filled with hatred. Elias sighed quietly. "Not exactly a warm welcome," he muttered under his breath. Serenia heard him and almost smiled, though she quickly masked it with calm dignity. "Come closer," she ordered. He stepped to the base of her throne. She looked down at him, her eyes softer now that the court was silent. "You are under my shield," she said so only he could hear. "They may hate you, but none can touch you." "Remember that," Elias gave a small nod. "I'll try not to get stabbed then." Despite herself, Serenia's lips curved faintly before she turned back to the court. "This council is dismissed. Leave us." One by one, the nobles bowed reluctantly and left the chamber. The guards followed until only Elias and Serenia remained. The silence felt heavy. Elias looked around at the glowing walls. "So this is your court, fancy, but everyone in here wants me dead." "They want what is familiar," Serenia replied softly. "For them, you are an enemy who has spilled Krillari blood. They do not understand why I honor you." Elias leaned against a pillar. "I don't understand it either. Where I come from, saving someone doesn't come with eternal contracts." She tilted her head. "And yet you saved me knowing I was your enemy." "Why?" Elias shrugged. "Because you were bleeding and couldn't fight back. Where I come from, we don't leave people to die like that. Doesn't matter if they're friend or foe." Serenia studied him for a long time, her violet eyes thoughtful. "Strange. Among my people, mercy is seen as weakness. Yet you speak of it as strength. Maybe that's why we've been fighting all these years, Elias replied quietly. Different ideas of what makes us strong. They fell silent again, the tension of two worlds pressing between them. Yet for the first time, Serenia felt that the human standing before her was not just an enemy soldier. He was something different, something she could not yet name. Later that night, Elias was given a chamber in the royal palace when they reached Krillar, the Empire's shining capital world. The city outside his window was breathtaking, towers of crystal rising into the clouds, streets glowing with streams of light, ships moving gracefully between spires. It was beautiful but alien. He felt like a stranger in every shadow. The next morning, Serenia summoned him again, this time to walk the palace gardens. The gardens were filled with silver trees that glowed softly and pools of water that shimmered with colors unknown to humans. You do not hide your thoughts, Serenia said as they walked. I can see the distrust in your eyes. Elias looked at her. Would you trust me if our places were switched? If you were standing in a human palace surrounded by soldiers who wanted you dead? She considered this, then shook her head. No, I would not. Perhaps that is why I asked you to walk here, to see that not all Krillari are your enemies. As they moved through the gardens, attendants and guards stared, whispering among themselves. A human walking beside the princess was something no one had ever seen before. But Serenia ignored them, her focus on Elias. You are blunt, she said at last. You speak without fear, even before nobles who could order your death if not for the law. That is unusual. I'm a soldier, Elias said. Fear doesn't help much when people are shooting at you. She smiled faintly, the first genuine smile he had seen. Perhaps that is why I believe you. You do not pretend. You do not flatter. You simply are. For Elias, the words felt strange, almost too gentle for a place like this. But he said nothing, only continued walking by her side. Days turned into weeks. Elias remained in the palace, always at Serenia's side. Many still hated him, but none dared touch him. Slowly, he began to see more of her world. He saw the endless ceremonies, the weight of politics, the pressure she bore as the future ruler. Behind her regal strength, he glimpsed loneliness. And Serenia, in turn, began to see Elias differently. His stubborn honesty, his willingness to speak truths others hid, his quiet loyalty. All these things made her question what she had been taught about humans. One evening, as the twin moons rose above Krillar, Serenia stood on a balcony overlooking the shining city. Elias stood behind her, arms crossed. You do not see it yet, she said softly. But your presence has already changed things. The nobles argue less. The soldiers whisper of honor. They cannot ignore you even if they wish to. Elias raised an eyebrow. And what about you? What do you see? Serenia turned, her eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. I see a man who bled for me when no one else would. A man my law binds me to, but also a man I choose to trust. Elias held her gaze for a long time, then nodded slightly. Then I guess we're both stuck with each other. She smiled, not with royal command, but with quiet warmth. Yes, bound by law, and perhaps by something more. The wind carried their silence into the night, as human and alien stood side by side, their worlds clashing, yet slowly, unwillingly, beginning to connect. The Krillari capital glittered like a jewel beneath the twin moons, its towers stretching into the sky as if carved from light itself. But inside the palace, shadows grew deeper each passing day. Whispers of rebellion echoed through the halls, carried in the voices of nobles who despised the human soldier standing at Princess Serenia's side. Captain Elias Ward had grown used to their stares. Every time he walked through the corridors, Krillari nobles stepped aside with scorn written on their faces. Guards gripped their spears tighter when he passed. Servants lowered their heads in silence. He was a living reminder that Serenia had invoked the oldest law for a human enemy. And now, the Empire itself trembled. Rumors spread of a powerful warlord, Lord Veyron, who challenged Serenia's claim to rule. Unlike her, he believed in conquest above all else. To him, peace with humanity was weakness, and Serenia's bond with Elias was proof she had betrayed Krillari honor. It was late one evening when Serenia summoned Elias to her private chamber. She stood by the tall crystal windows, her white hair glowing faintly in the starlight. Her robe of silver shimmered, but her eyes carried the weight of sleepless nights. You've heard the rumors, she said softly as Elias entered. About this Veyron? Elias asked, leaning against the wall. Hard not to hear. Half the guards whisper his name. Serenia nodded. He gathers support. Many nobles see him as the stronger choice. If he moves against me, it will not be politics, it will be war inside the palace. Elias crossed his arms. And they'll use me as the excuse. The weak human chained to their princess. Her eyes lowered for a moment. Yes. Then she looked back at him, firm and unyielding. But I will not release you. Not from the bond. Not even if it costs me everything. Elias stared at her, surprised by the quiet fire in her words. He had seen her strength before, but now he saw the depth of her resolve. She would rather risk her throne than break the ancient law or abandon him. Before he could respond, the chamber doors burst open. A young Krillari messenger fell to his knees, gasping, "Princess, Warlord Varen's forces have entered the city. They march for the palace." Serenia's face went pale. So soon? Elias grabbed his rifle from where it rested by the wall. Then we don't have much time. What's the plan? Serenia's eyes flickered to him. The plan is survival. The palace shook with distant blasts as Varen's soldiers forced their way through the outer gates. The halls filled with the sound of alarms, guards rushing to defend their princess. But the traitors were many, and their weapons burned bright. Elias and Serenia moved quickly through the corridors, flanked by a handful of loyal guards. Every turn brought new clashes, crystal spears striking, energy bolts flashing, shouts echoing. Elias fought with precision, his rifle spitting bursts of fire as he covered Serenia's retreat. At one point, 3 of Varen's soldiers blocked the corridor ahead. Their armor gleamed like jagged ice and their weapons glowed dangerously. "Stand aside," Serenia ordered, her voice sharp. "You defy the throne," one soldier sneered. "We do not defy the throne. We defend it from weakness." His eyes flicked toward Elias with hatred. "The human dies here." Elias raised his rifle. "You can try." The corridor erupted in combat. Blades clashed against rifle fire, sparks flying. Elias ducked a glowing spear, rolling to one knee before firing a precise shot that dropped his enemy. Serenia's guards fought bravely, but 2 fell quickly under the traitor's assault. Serenia herself wielded a ceremonial blade, its edge glowing with violet energy. She fought with grace, every strike carrying the weight of her heritage. Elias covered her flank, his rifle cutting down the last soldier who tried to stab her from behind. When silence returned, the floor was littered with fallen bodies. Elias breathed heavily, sweat dripping down his face. "You fight well," Serenia said, her voice quiet but steady. "Not as well as you," Elias muttered, glancing at her glowing blade. For a brief moment, despite the chaos, their eyes met. There was no divide of human and Krillari then, only 2 warriors standing together in the storm. They pushed forward, finally reaching the grand hall at the palace's heart. But there, waiting for them, was Lord Varen himself. He was taller than most Krillari, his armor jagged and black, his crest crown sharp like a weapon. His violet eyes burned with fury as he looked at Serenia, then at Elias. "Princess," Varen said, his voice deep and commanding, "you shame the Empire. You bind yourself to a human, an enemy, and you speak of peace while our fleets hunger for war. Step down now, or I will take your crown." Serenia stood tall, lifting her blade. "I will never step down. You may challenge me, but know this, I stand not alone." Varen's gaze fell on Elias. "Yes, you stand with him, a weak outsider. Break the bond, cast him aside, and I may yet spare you." The hall grew silent. The loyal guards looked at Serenia anxiously. Even Elias felt the weight of the moment pressing down. If she broke the bond, he would be free, but alone, surrounded by enemies. Serenia did not hesitate. Her voice rang out clear and defiant. "No, I will not break the law. He shed blood for me. His life is bound to mine. If you want my crown, Varen, you must strike me down and strike him down as well." The hall erupted in shouts. Varen roared in fury. "Then so be it." His soldiers surged forward. The battle began. The grand hall became chaos. Energy bolts streaked through the air, blades clashed, and the sound of war filled the space. Elias fought at Serenia's side, every shot of his rifle precise, every move protecting her back. But the enemy was countless. Loyal guards fell one by one. Elias was struck in the shoulder by a spear, the pain white-hot, but he ripped it free and kept fighting. Serenia's blade flashed, her movements a blur of silver and violet, but even she began to falter under the endless assault. At last, Elias saw the opening. Varen himself strode towards Serenia, his black blade raised to strike her down. Without thinking, Elias moved. He threw himself between them, catching the blow on his rifle. The weapon shattered, the force sending him sprawling, blood spilling from his wounds. Elias! Serena cried, her eyes wide with fear. He forced himself to his feet, staggering, blood dripping from his side. His vision blurred, but his voice was steady. I'm not letting him take you. Varen laughed, cruel and mocking. You see? The human bleeds for you again. How many times must he fall before you realize his weakness? Serena's fury ignited. She stepped forward, her blade blazing brighter than ever. He is not weak. He is stronger than you will ever be. With a cry she struck. Their blades clashed, sparks flying, the sound echoing like thunder. The duel shook the hall, Serena's speed against Varen's brute strength. Elias could barely stand, but he watched, forcing himself to stay conscious. At last, Serena's blade pierced Varen's armor, striking his chest. The warlord staggered, eyes wide with shock, before collapsing to the ground. The hall fell silent. The traitor's soldiers froze, their leader defeated. Slowly, one by one, they dropped their weapons and knelt. Serena stood tall, her blade dripping with energy. She turned to Elias, who was leaning against a broken pillar, barely able to breathe. You fool, she whispered, rushing to his side. You would give your life again for me? Elias gave a faint smile through the pain. Told you, I don't waste my blood. She caught him as he fell, her arms trembling as she held him close. Her voice shook, but her words were clear. Then hear me, all of you, she cried to the hall. This human is not weakness. He is my shield. My proof that strength comes not only from conquest, but from sacrifice. By the law he is bound to me, but by my choice I now bind myself to him as well. From this day forth he is my eternal protector. The hall erupted with voices, but none dared challenge her. The law was clear. The princess had spoken. Elias, fading into unconsciousness, heard her words echo like a vow carved into stone. Bound by blood, bound by choice forever. The grand hall still echoed with the clash of battle, though silence now hung heavy over the fallen. The once proud banners of the Krillari were torn, the crystal pillars scorched with fire and energy. In the center of it all, Princess Serena knelt on the shattered floor, cradling the bleeding form of Captain Elias Ward. Her heart pounded in her chest. His blood stained her hands, bright red against her pale skin. His breathing was shallow, his eyes half closed, but still he tried to smile. Don't look at me like that, he muttered weakly. I'm not dead yet. Serena's throat tightened. You will not die. Not while I live. Do you hear me, Elias? He gave the smallest nod before slipping into unconsciousness. Serena held him tighter, her gaze rising to the loyal guards who remained. Bring the healers, she ordered, her voice ringing through the broken chamber. Now! The guards scrambled, rushing from the hall. Serena lowered her head, her silver hair falling across her face as she whispered, You gave everything for me again, and still you call yourself weak. Foolish human. The palace healers worked through the night. Elias was carried to a chamber of glowing crystal, where the air itself hummed with restorative energy. Strange lights passed over his body as Krillari healers applied shimmering salves and whispered ancient chants. Serena did not leave his side. She sat beside the bed, watching every rise and fall of his chest, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her people urged her to rest, but she refused. He saved me, she said simply. I will not abandon him now. When dawn broke over the capital, Elias stirred at last. His eyes opened slowly, blinking against the golden light filtering through the chamber windows. The first thing he saw was Serena, her eyes red from exhaustion, but her face glowing with relief. You're awake, she whispered, her voice trembling. Elias gave a weak chuckle. Guess I'm harder to kill than they thought. She leaned closer, her hands gently pressing his arm. You should not speak. You must heal. And miss your lectures? He teased, though his voice was soft with pain. For the first time since the battle, Serena smiled. It was small but real. The days that followed were uneasy. Lord Varen was dead, but the empire was divided. Some nobles accepted Serena's victory. Others whispered of rebellion still. The bond with Elias was a symbol of defiance against old traditions, and not everyone was willing to accept it. But Serena refused to bend. She called a council in the throne chamber, her voice clear as she stood before her people. You call him weakness, she said, gesturing to Elias, who stood at her side despite his injuries. But it was his sacrifice that saved this throne. It was his courage that ended the traitors' war. And by the ancient law, his life is bound to mine. I will not deny that bond. I will not deny him, the nobles murmured among themselves. Some scowled. Others looked uneasy, but none dared openly challenge her. Elias, standing tall though his body still ached, spoke in his steady human voice. I didn't bleed for crowns or laws. I did it because I made a choice. To stand by her, to protect her. If you can't see strength in that, then maybe strength means something different to me than it does to you." The chamber fell silent. Even the nobles who despised him could not deny the weight of his words. From that day, the whispers grew quieter. Slowly, reluctantly, the empire began to shift. But not all challenges were of politics. Outside the palace, the city bore the scars of battle. Streets were cracked, towers burned, families mourned. Serenia and Elias walked those streets together, meeting the people whose lives had been torn by war. Children stared at Elias with wide eyes, some frightened, others curious. He knelt down, showing them the small trinkets he carried from Earth, an old coin, a worn badge, a simple knife. "It's not magic," he would say with a smile, "just a reminder. Where I come from, we carry things like this to remember who we are." And slowly the children began to smile back. Serenia watched with quiet awe. Her people had always seen humans as enemies, as outsiders, yet here Elias stood, bridging a gap with nothing more than honesty and kindness. "You changed them without even trying," she whispered one evening as they walked back to the palace. Elias shrugged. "I just talked to them. That's all?" "That is not all," Serenia said firmly. "That is power." Weeks passed and the bond between them only grew stronger. At first, Elias thought of it as duty. He had saved her, and by the strange law of her people, their lives were tied. But now, as time went on, he felt something deeper. When Serenia spoke in council, he stood behind her, not as a prisoner or a symbol, but as a partner. When he trained with the palace guards, she often came to watch, her laughter breaking through the heavy weight of their duties. And at night, when the halls were quiet, they spoke not as princess and soldier, but simply as Serenia and Elias, two souls bound by chance, yet choosing each day to remain together. One night, Serenia brought him to the top of the highest tower. The stars stretched endlessly across the sky, brighter than Elias had ever seen. "In my people's belief," Serenia said softly, "the stars are the eyes of those who came before us. They watch always. They judge always." Elias looked at her. "And what do you think they see now?" She turned to him, her silver hair glowing in the starlight. "They see us. And for once, I do not think they judge. I think they approve." But peace was not easy. A message arrived from the human fleet stationed beyond Krillari space. They demanded answers. Why had Elias not returned? Why had communication been silent? Serenia looked troubled as she handed him the message. "They call for you. They wish to take you back." Elias felt a weight settle on him. He had almost forgotten in these weeks that he was still a soldier of Earth. His duty, his command, it still called to him. "Do you wish to return?" Serenia asked quietly, though her voice carried the faintest tremor. He looked at her for a long moment. Her eyes were steady, but beneath them he saw the fear she tried to hide, fear that he might choose duty over bond. At last Elias spoke. "I was a soldier. I followed orders, fought battles, did what I was told. But here, with you, I chose, and I'm not about to walk away from that." Relief flooded her face. She closed her eyes for a moment before whispering, "Then you are truly bound, not by law, but by your will." The day came when Serenia stood before the Empire once more. The throne chamber was filled, every noble, every guard, every voice gathered to hear her words. "My people," she declared, "we have lived too long in chains of conquest and hatred. We believed strength came from war, but war nearly destroyed us. Now a new strength rises, a strength born of sacrifice, of loyalty, of unity. This human stands as proof of that. He is not our enemy. He is our ally. From this day forth, let no one call him weakness. For he is my protector, my shield, and by the stars above he is forever bound to me." The chamber shook with voices. Some shouted in protest, others in support. But in that moment history was made. The old ways had been challenged, and something new had begun. Elias stood at her side, his head high, his scars clear for all to see. He was no longer just a soldier, no longer just a human far from home. He was part of something greater. And when Serenia looked at him, her eyes soft despite the fire of her speech, he knew the truth. The bond was no longer just an ancient law. It was choice. It was trust. It was forever. That night, as the stars burned bright over the Krillari capital, Elias and Serenia stood together on the palace balcony. Below them, the city still healed, still struggled, but hope stirred like a fragile flame. Elias rested his hand lightly against the rail, his eyes on the horizon. You know, he said quietly. Back on Earth, they'd never believe this story. Serenia smiled faintly. Then let them not believe. The truth does not need their approval. Only ours. He turned to her, meeting her gaze. For once, no words were needed. The silence between them spoke louder than anything else. And above, the stars bore witness to a bond that no law, no rebellion, no empire could ever break, forever bound.